Well, good morning, everybody. Mike Keenan, KM Fitness here in Manasquan, New Jersey. Today, my guest is Doreen Bridgman. Doreen is a speech and language pathologist, the creator and owner of The Cognitive Coach. That's her business. Thank you for coming today, Doreen.
Thank you for inviting me.
Well, you're very welcome. Doreen's going to give us some insight as into brain health today and how it relates to our diet. So, first of all, Doreen, what exactly is a speech and language pathologist?
Well, a speech-language pathologist assesses and treats any areas of communication and swallowing. So that can include speaking, listening, memory, attention, reading, and writing skills. Some people have what are called congenital difficulties, where they're born with maybe weak musculature. Other children may have developmental delays that are diagnosed as they're aging, and then other people have normally developed speech and language skills, but due to an injury or an illness, those skills are impacted. So I've spent my career working in the field of brain injury, which has led me to the interest in brain health.
When we see the three letters TBI, what does that stand for?
Traumatic brain injury.
Okay, because you see that a lot out there and people kind of gloss over it and don't know what that means.
Right, and the current research is changing. Concussion used to be considered a mild injury, and now concussion is falling under traumatic brain injury because it is a traumatic brain injury, and the symptoms that people experience from concussion are not mild.
I agree. And we see that a lot in professional sports now. It's very topical.
Yes.
Okay, well, we wanted to focus a little bit more on nutrition today. So let's turn this towards sugar. How does sugar affect our ability to think and focus clearly? And let's take this more towards like adults and senior population. What are your thoughts on that?
Okay, so sugar, in order to understand how sugar impacts your brain, you need to understand that our brains and our guts are connected. It's called the brain-gut connection. So anything that we're ingesting into our gut affects our brain, and then our brain impacts our gut. Sugar is an inflammatory. So what happens is when you ingest too much sugar into your diet, you can experience what's called a leaky gut, and undigested food particles can escape into the bloodstream and travel up towards your brain. At that point, what happens is your brain becomes inflamed because we know anything that our bodies don't recognize in the system, right? Our body has that response to contain it. And your brain does the same thing. However, when you inflame your brain, you will start to recognize cognitive difficulties, things like not being able to stay focused. You'll have difficulty with memory. You may notice some emotional changes like increased depression, increased anxiety. Your sleep-wake cycle can be interrupted. And as that's happening, the signals down to your gut to tell your gut what to do during digestion are also impacted. So you get this negative cycle going, which for a lot of people is what's happening. So if you said to somebody, well, do you feel like you're not able to stay focused because you eat so much sugar? They say no, because to them, that's what they do every day. That's their norm.
Exactly.
It wouldn't be until they took sugar away would they start to recognize, like, oh, I can focus better, or I don't lose my keys as often now.
Yeah, definitely there is a connection between that and their ability to focus and concentrate. Well, let's talk a little bit about the kids now, more like with their ability to learn and their behavior in school. How does sugar affect them?
Well, so the same, right? If they're eating, let's say, a high sugar cereal in the morning, and then you expect them to sit in a class all day and focus, they're going to have difficulty. We also have found that there is a dopamine increase with sugar, so that's our feel-good neurotransmitter. So when we feel good, we don't tend to sit very quietly, right? We tend to be excited, want to move around. So if you're sending your children to school, hyped on sugar, it is going to be harder for them to stay focused.
I definitely can see that. Now, along those lines, sometimes I'll stop and I might grab a coffee on my way to work, and I'll see kids lining up those energy drinks on the countertop to pay for. Tell us a little bit about the extreme levels of caffeine and sugar in these energy drinks and how that affects a child's brain as they're going off to their day.
Right. So again, if they're creating that inflammatory process without recognizing it, they're not going to be able to stay focused. They're going to have difficulty learning. That's going to cause them to not do well on a test. That's going to increase their stress level. Before you know it, they're complaining of headaches, a lot of the somatic complaints, stomach ache, and you know, parents are getting frustrated. But what the kids are reaching for is more sugar. So, oh, you know, this is going to help me focus. Well, it may help them focus for a short period of time, then they crash. So they won't need it again. And if they've had that dopamine increase, they're going to want it even more. So you're really setting them up for this cycle that's going to be very difficult to break. There's a saying, neurons that fire together, wire together. And once those neurons are wired together, you've now created a behavior.
Yeah, I mean, you know, with regards to the sugar, we both witnessed, you know, kids crying in the aisles of the supermarket because mom won't buy them their sugary cereal.
Right. Or the worst is, you know, they cry and then you give in, and without realizing it again, you know, you do that enough times and you've now created that behavior that will be difficult to break.
So it's almost imprinted on them at this point.
Yes.
Wow.
And the same for adults. Neuroplasticity, you know, we used to think that you had what you had in your 20s. That's not true. The researchers are finding now that we can create new behaviors, new pathways up until our 80s. So we as adults fall into that same sugar fix, which is why we're seeing increased obesity and diabetes and you know, all those other inflammatory diseases.
I agree. You know, you mentioned to me earlier today that there are so many other parameters, and Doreen is going to come back in the future and talk about some other parameters outside of diet that people can do with regards to brain health, because I'm sitting in on a class that she's doing now, and there's so many other factors that go into it, but for the purpose of today, we wanted to keep it more towards diet. You mentioned dopamine earlier, and also in our conversations, you've talked a lot about serotonin. Can you touch base on those two and how the gut-brain axis, as you would call it, is affected?
Sure. So similar neurons are found both in the brain and the gut, which led researchers to make the connection. Dopamine is our feel-good neurotransmitter. So again, if you do something and it makes you feel good, like, hey, I ate that candy bar, I felt great. Next time I want to feel good, I'm going to go back and have another candy bar. Right? So we're making that connection. Serotonin is more responsible for our sleep-wake cycles and some of our emotional well-being. And when you have that inflammatory process, you're impacting your serotonin levels. So you may see or you may feel more depressed. You may have a harder time getting to sleep. You may find that your stress levels are increasing because everything is connected. So if we don't sleep, we tend to be more irritable. If you're more irritable, you get into more arguments. That increases your stress level. Now I want sugar to make me feel better. And the cycle just keeps going on and on.
Wow. We've also talked a little bit about supplementation. A lot of people will come in and say to me, you know, I feel like I can get all the nutrients I need from the food I eat. And I say, well, if you're living on an organic farm in Costa Rica, you might have a chance. But as a speech and language pathologist, what are your thoughts about supplementation? Do you take supplements yourself?
I do. You know, I used to try and get all my nutrients through natural food. However, I am a fairly picky eater, and there are certain things I will not eat, so I need to supplement. Also living in New Jersey, you know, we have access to certain fruits and vegetables, not all, and varying your diet to the degree that you really need to is really challenging. So I do use supplements.
So what you're saying is you can't get all the vitamins and minerals you need from chicken fingers and French fries.
Exactly.
Okay. Doreen, how can people find you if they'd like to learn more information or get to work with you in the future?
You can find me on my website, thecognitivecoach.net. I have a Facebook, The Cognitive Coach, or my email is doreen@thecognitivecoach.net.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for coming, and I'm looking forward to inviting you back as a guest in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care, guys. I'll see you
Bye-bye.
soon.